We now move on to vitamin A. Vitamin A was, in a sense, discovered by Dr. Elmer McCollum, a famous biochemist in the United States. And he was the one who in 1913 identified something he called a fat-soluble factor A that was required for the health of rats. And in those days, it was not so common to do research on animals. But he certainly was one of the first ones to do this. And he found that animals that were fed butterfat and egg yolks, they thrived, while those who were given lard or olive oil died. What was going on here? Well, today we know. The foods that allowed these animals to thrive all contained vitamin A. But vitamin A is not one single entity. Vitamin A is a mixture of compounds, but these are all interconvertible in the body. Vitamin A is found in animal foods, and liver being a classic example. The liver is very rich in these retinoids, as we call them. However, you do not have to eat animal foods in order to have a sufficient intake of vitamin A. The reason for that is that there's a substance called provitamin A, which in the body can be converted into vitamin A, and this is beta-carotene. And carotenoids, which are found in a large variety of plant products, and beta-carotene is one of these, are of course widespread. So it is possible to get sufficient intake of vitamin A without having to eat animal foods. Because beta-carotene can give rise to vitamin A in the body, and there are also different forms of vitamin A found in meat. I showed you the retinoids. Instead of talking about vitamin A intake in terms of micrograms or milligrams, as we do with many other things, we use the term IU, or international unit. And research has shown that you can get sufficient amount of vitamin A by eating beta-carotene, but you have to eat more beta-carotene than you would have to eat vitamin A, because the conversion is not so efficient. So this is why we use the term international unit, because that can refer to any kind of intake of vitamin A. And one international unit is equivalent to 0.3 micrograms of retinol, which is the preformed vitamin A as found in meat. But in order to get the same amount from beta-carotene, you'd have to eat 0.6 micrograms. So to get away from the differences in numbers, international units are used. And you know that if you're told to get 400 international units, yes, let's say, it doesn't matter where it comes from. If the label says 400 IU, it will do the same thing, whether it comes from retinol or whether it comes from beta-carotene, although the actual weight of the ingredients is not the same. So what is vitamin A good for? Well, as McCollum showed in his rats, you need it for bone growth, for reproduction, and for the health of the immune system. It's also very important for the appearance of the skin and the mucous membranes. And the mucous membranes are important because they repel bacteria and viruses more effectively when they are healthy. It is also essential to vision. And if you have a deficiency in vitamin A, there will be some vision loss. And this is because retinal, that's another form of vitamin A, is very important in the functioning of the eye. And in fact, supplements can even aid with a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. It is night vision that is a giveaway of vitamin A deficiency. When someone doesn't see well in the dark, it can be due to insufficient intake of vitamin A. And this is where the story of carrots and vision fits in. Why do people think that eating carrots is good for the eyes? Because night vision is a problem with vitamin A deficiency. If you have healthy eyes, eating more carrots is not going to do anything. But if someone is suffering from impaired vision in the dark, it may be due to vitamin A deficiency, in which case eating carrots can actually do the job. But of course, this is something that you have to discuss with a physician because vision problems can be manifested in many, many other ways as well. But it is well known, unfortunately, that vitamin A deficiency affects many, many, many children in the developing world. the numbers are astounding. Not only can it result in blindness, but because of impairment of immune function, it can lead to death. And it's estimated to claim over 600,000 children's lives every year. And up to 500,000 go blind every year. Now, of course, this isn't happening in Canada. It's not happening in the US or in Western Europe. This is happening in developing countries. But it's a gigantic problem. And it's a problem that, in theory, of course, can be solved by increasing their intake of vitamin A. But how do you do this? Well, one approach is golden rice, which is a genetically modified rice. It's a rice that has been implanted with a gene extracted from a daffodil plant, also with several genes from a bacterium. And together, these genes code for enzymes that will produce beta-carotene in the rice. That's why it actually looks yellow. This is now available. And in fact, companies would be willing to make it available at very low cost or even for free in underdeveloped areas. But it hasn't taken off. And the reason it hasn't taken off is mostly because of the fear of genetically modified foods, which to a large extent is unwarranted. The fear of vitamin A deficiency should surpass the fear of anything to do with genetic modification, because vitamin A deficiency is catastrophic. There's also another vegetable product that can fit the bill here, and that is being labeled the golden potato. This also has been developed the same way as golden rice. This is not on the market yet. This is relatively new, probably a couple of years before this will make it to the market, if it does. But here too, a serving can go a long way to giving people enough vitamin A. Of course, the question comes up from people, especially from people who are opposed to genetic modification, why not just distribute vitamin A or beta-carotene supplements, or show these people how to grow carrots or sweet potatoes? Well, yeah, that sounds good, except that is not really viable. Distributing pills in the underdeveloped areas where people are not used to taking pills doesn't work well. I mean, there are attempts to do this, but you have to take these pills on a regular basis, not every day, because vitamin A is fat soluble, but you have to take them quite regularly, and very difficult to get people to do that. And of course, in areas where rice and potatoes are the staple foods, they don't grow carrots, they don't grow sweet potatoes. These are foreign foods to these people. So therefore, it is a much more attractive approach to try to improve the foods that they already are eating. And there's absolutely no evidence that golden rice has any kind of negative effect in the diet, and there's plenty of evidence that it can help reduce vitamin A deficiency. There's only one concern that comes up with beta-carotene, and that is that in smokers, beta-carotene supplements have actually been shown to increase the risk of lung cancer. But this was a finding, this goes back to the 1990s. It was a finding that was actually replicated, so it is certainly real. But it is only in smokers taking large doses of beta-carotene. How do we know this? Because beta-carotene is an antioxidant, and it was thought that it could actually reduce the risk of lung cancer in smokers. But surprisingly, that was not the case. But you cannot overdose on beta-carotene unless you are a smoker. So the advice is, if you're a smoker, yes, do stay away from beta-carotene. Otherwise, beta-carotene is totally safe, but vitamin A, preformed vitamin A, as one finds in meat, on that you can overdose. With an excess of beta-carotene, the worst thing that can happen is that you turn orange. Carotenemia, as this is called. The palms turn orange, the face can turn orange, but it doesn't have any other consequence. On the other hand, overdosing on preformed vitamin A, that's a different story. Polar bear liver, for example, is so toxic that it has killed Arctic explorers because of its high dose of vitamin A. There are stories where Arctic explorers who, for one reason or another, had no more food to eat and had to hunt, and they ate the polar bear liver, developed vitamin A toxicity. You don't have to worry about vitamin A toxicity from taking the pills that are on the market, but nobody should ever exceed 10,000 IU a day. Even that is, I think, a pretty high amount. It's unnecessary, certainly in the context of North America. If someone wants to take vitamin A supplements, 4,000 or 5,000 IU a day, I think would be fine. There's another interesting connection to vitamin A, and that is in the treatment of certain skin diseases. Tretinoin, oral trans retinoic acid, or isoretinoic acid it's also called. This is not one of the forms of retinoic acid that occurs actually in food. This is made in the laboratory, but it's very interesting because it can have a dramatic effect on acne. So it's known as vitamin A acid gel, or Retin A. And you apply it topically, and it's effective for a variety of skin blemishes. More interesting is the fact that taken internally in a drug, used to be called Accutane, but now it's available as isotretinoin under its generic name, it can be almost magical in clearing up recalcitrant acne, as you can see here. However, there's a very, very big but here. This is a drug that must not be taken during pregnancy because it has a very, very powerful teratogenic effect. That is, it affects the embryo in a negative way. And this is why doctors who prescribe isotretinoin or Accutane have to make sure that if they are prescribing this to a woman who has the chance of becoming pregnant, that they are taking the birth control pill or using some other birth control method, because the risk is quite significant. So vitamin A is kind of double-faced. We certainly need it because it's important in all the things I said, immune function, vision, etc. But you don't want to overdo it. It's a fat-soluble vitamin, and fat-soluble vitamins can build up in the body and you can overdose.